It's just, oh man, did you drop? I'm frozen. Welcome back to another episode of Successful, the podcast.
I'm one of your hosts, Blake, and joining me,
I'm one of your other hosts, Justin.
And this is the podcast all about the not so subtle truth about success and
the art of sucking less in pursuit of it. Let's not waste any more time and get right to the show.
So I have something that I think you'll appreciate that our audience will also probably find funny.
I'm ready.
So there's two things that my family and my friends point out to me. The first one is I apparently, when I am angry or agitated, have what they call the angry Blake face.
Ooh, okay.
And it's apparently a very distinct face. And I can't recreate it here because I actually don't know what it looks like, but I would imagine it looks something like this.
Ooh, I don't want to see that face again. I'm terrified.
And the other one is my friends say that when somebody says something to me that I either don't agree with or I'm just like, okay, I have what they call the judgmental Capricorn eyebrows. And it's where one of my eyebrows kind of goes up and I'm just like.
See, that look is kind of fun because I do that too. I'm like, what? And so I had the resting, what would you call it? The Capricorn eyebrow? What was it?
Oh, it's judgmental Capricorn eyebrows.
So I've got the judgmental Virgo eyebrow. So high five to us being judgmental. That first face, man, I'm going to tell you, when you have kids, they're going to be terrified of you. That is a great.
Oh, apparently people are already scared of me. Well, I don't get mad very often. So if you see that face, you know something happened.
I'm not going to lie. I don't want to see that face again, Blake. So let's make sure that we, whatever I'm going to do, if I'm starting to go down that road, you got to be like, flag on the field, flag on the field. You're starting to get to that. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to back off big time. And I think that's what's fun about family because they can call those things out in your friends too, right? What I hate is, because I've got an expressive face too, is when they present coffee or whatever and you're like, oh, you didn't like it? And I'm like, what do you mean you didn't like it? And like, well, your face, you seem like you didn't like it. I'm like, but I can't see I don't mean to. It's just express. I don't know what it's doing. It does its own thing. And so sometimes it's hard because you can't see your own face when you're talking, unless you're a total narcissist and you walk around with like a mirror. I don't know. Maybe. Eric, this is for you. Just kidding. It's hard for those moments because a lot of the time your face does things that you think it's doing, but it's not. My problem is I don't have a good BS face. So if I'm listening to you and I'm not interested, I'm sure my face is going like up in my brain. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm interested, kind of faking it. But my face is really going,
I'm the same way, but I'll tell you, I wish it was just my face. My mouth does that too. I have some really funny stories of times when stuff just comes out of my mouth, which kind of leads into our topic today, which is funny, but I'll tell two of them here because they're really short and they're really funny. So back when I was serving, I had a party of like 10 guys who were coming in for a business meeting and one of them was late. And of course you start out with getting everybody drinks when they're first showing up. So I walked in there and I was getting everyone's drinks and the guy who was late sits down. I introduced myself to everybody because that's how you start, especially in fine dining. And he goes, Blake, isn't that a boy's name? And I literally, without missing a beat, was like, apparently not. And the whole room died. They were laughing so hard. And the guy, like his whole face went red. And they were like, oh, she really told you. Like,
loser. Yeah, don't make a dumbass comment again. Yes, thank you.
And the other one was, it's always these late people, man. There must be like some sort of trend with that. But anyway, I was going up to a table. There was supposed to be 4 people. The one lady was late. I had already gotten everybody drinks. She shows up, she sits down. And I said, because I was already in the process of asking if they wanted to go ahead and order appetizers. So I was asking that. And she looks up at me and she goes, well, I just got here. So why don't you get us drinks? And then, we'll come back to you. And I said, okay, that's fine. So I asked her what she wanted. She wanted a glass of wine. I leave. I go do my other tables. I literally was probably gone for maybe 6 minutes. And I come back with her glass of wine. I put it down and she goes, well, there you are. And I said, here I am. Oops.
Great tip, but you felt good, right?
Well, actually, I did get tipped really well. It was probably because she was one of those people that I guess is either embarrassing to her family or her family knows she's like this because they tipped me really well and they were kind of like trying not to giggle. And I was like, oops.
We're sorry for her. We're unfortunately blood related. Otherwise, we would disassociate from her. Yes. Which I think is a beautiful segue to today's subject of dealing with people that are off-putting or you just don't like. One of the things I love about people is we all know someone like this, that the world is rosy, everything is perfect, and, I just love everybody. Dogs can love everybody. People can't. It's interesting because a lot of the times, especially at work, we bury those feelings. It becomes this weird thing. And I'm going to just kick it off briefly with a very high level story here of one of my first jobs ever in entertainment. I loved my boss, but I always worked with his partner. They always paired people together. And that was part of what made it successful was there wasn't just like silos. Everyone did certain things, but I never really saw my boss, but I always worked with this one guy. From the moment we were in the same room together, it was like one of those things where magnetic, except polarizing, we just didn't like each other. So we probably 2-3 weeks of this, I was trying to be really nice and it wasn't working. And so he actually did something that I've never had anyone do before. And I respect him massively for this. And it helped a lot he's like, hey, let's go grab some drinks after work today. I'm like, oh God, I'm gonna hang out with this tool. So anyways, we go and he's like, look, I know there's something here. And he was very honest. He goes, look, sometimes you're just not going to like people out there. And I don't know why I don't like you, but I don't think you like me either. I'm like, exactly. And he's like, look, I want it on the table. I want us to acknowledge that. Let's make fun of it. And we have to work together if we're going to be successful. So let's just laugh about it. Know that it's there. Don't be awkward about it. And let's go forward. Holy crap. I've never had anyone do it since. I've tried it with people. I've never had that luck that I did with him, but that was a really cool way to diffuse the situation that I knew I had to work every day for hours with him. We'd sit in rooms together and now we had kind of our own language. We could look at each other we'd be like, okay, let's pause for a sec. Let's go to the bathroom, break, whatever. It's getting too heated or whatever. And so it was a nice way of breaking the tension that I've never had repeated.
Wow, that's cool. I have not experienced that hardly ever. There's really only one story that comes to mind that's kind of similar, but it went in a different direction, which was interesting. So when I was working at a production company, in this particular one, there was all the television stuff was upstairs and the feature film stuff was downstairs, but it was like an old Hollywood style house. So the upstairs was like, they weren't separate from each other. Like it was almost like a loft almost. So you could hear everything. There was this one in particular executive assistant up there who, man, she just gave me a hard time. She was just snotty. Every little thing had to be so difficult. And she talked down to everybody. And she's just infuriating, like just completely infuriating because she was just so negative all the time, which was hilarious because the other executive assistant up there was the polar opposite of that. And she was exactly what you're saying, that like sunshine and daisies, everything's always perfect attitude. So it was so weird walking upstairs because there were these two, it was almost like over here's a rain cloud and over here's like the sun and some flowers, and they would just like clash with each other all the time, but they were best friends. It was very strange. Like they hung out all the time. They lived together. It was a very weird situation. So anyway, one day I go up there and like I said, sometimes shit just comes out of my mouth. And she said something to me that made me respond kind of like that, where whatever it was I was thinking or feeling or whatever just like came out. And I was like, because she was definitely my superior at the time. And I remember she looked at me and she looked like she was pissed. And I was like, oh shit. She starts dying laughing. And I'm like, okay, this is good.
Weird.
Right? And then she goes, oh, well, that was refreshing. She goes, I like you. And I was like, really? I said, frankly, I didn't think you did. She goes, well, I didn't, but now I like you. And I'm going to tell you why. And she went on this whole like spiel about everybody previous to me who had been in that position was supposedly inadequate at their job and couldn't do basic things. And so she was frustrated because she was in television. So she was always overworked and all this stuff. And she's like, you just make my life easier. And that's like the whole point of having, your position is supposed to help each other out. And I've never actually had that. And from that day on, we were fine. Her attitude shifted, but it was the weirdest. To this day, I still don't know exactly where the change of heart came from or what it was exactly. And I wish I could remember what I said to her because I don't, but it was just such a weird situation and it just shifted everything after that. And it was just, to this day, it's such a strange story because I still don't know what the hell happened exactly, but
But it
It is
worked.
kind of funny. It worked. Yeah.
I think this kind of gets into one of the things that it's helpful with dealing with these people is if you have a mutual understanding of things. It's easy when you both don't like each other and you kind of play by certain rules. You kind of walk in a room, you know what to do. It's when you don't understand why they don't like you. That situation, like, it's just a weird thing. Like, what did I do? And so one time I had a boss and I was transferred to her and they were putting the team together for the first time. They were building from the ground up and you didn't really have a say. They just put you in these teams. Probably a weekend after everything had been done and everyone got us situated, they had a big team meeting. She looked around the room. She basically wouldn't stop looking at me. Like it was, but not in a good way. It was that like, did you hear what I said? Look, that kind of thing. And so I didn't really take it. I was like, okay, I don't know her. Let's give her a little bit of time here. So about a month into it, she kept doing that and like looking, and like really directing it at me like there was something wrong. So I went into her office one day and I was like, look, I feel like I'm doing something wrong here. I think we got off on a wrong foot. I don't know what's going on here. And she goes, look, I'm just going to be honest with you. You're way too young to be on this team. And I'm like, what? And she's like, you're just way too young. I'm like, first of all, you don't know how old I am. You don't have access to those records. I don't talk about it. And what? You can't do that at work. And so we started talking about it. And I guess she had this whole weird thing with like, she thinks that young people are dumb. She never had kids because she thinks kids are dumb, like this whole thing. And so I finally put the pieces together. I was like, look, I'm older than you think I am. I promise to respect you and give me a chance. And she did. And we actually ended up working really well together. And she actually became a very strong mentor over time. And I think we both kind of changed each other's views because I was also like, oh God, she's old, like she's going to be stuck in her ways. She's going to be a pain in the ass. She's going to be slow and she's going to want everything done her way. And we both kind of, I think, complement each other and help each other. But I'll tell you, those first probably 5 months, even after talking, it was very awkward because I felt like I was called out all the time and I was under the microscope so much and it freaking sucked. It sucked. But the worst part was being the youngest person on the team. It felt like everyone else knew that that's what she was doing too. Like, oh God, who's this young kid? And I'm like, it was just a very awkward, very weighted feeling. And then by the end, once we got the proposal on time, once we got the deal, once we got everything, and we saw everyone working as a team, everyone started appreciating it. But it took everyone getting on board probably at least 8-9 months. I mean, it was not fun. And then once everything gelled, it was a great team. But I mean, 8-9 months of everyone, like I worked our stuff out and then it was trying to work issues out with everyone else. I'm telling you, I think it was probably late 20s, early 30s. It was a lot of pressure when you're just trying to perform your job. Part of what's frustrating when you don't like people is you just want to go to work and do your job. You just want to get it done and move on to something else. And it sucks when you have to add the emotional layer there because it's so exhausting and it's mentally confusing, it's taxing, and it takes away from what you should be doing.
Well, this is a little off topic, but you bring up something that I do think we should discuss in another episode more in depth, because ironically in the industry, well, not even just the entertainment industry, though, in all the industries that I'm in, ageism has been a huge problem for me because everyone thinks I'm so much younger than I am because I'm Asian. And then they look at my resume and go, how the hell do you have like over a decade's worth of experience? And like start like questioning things. But there is sort of this, I've had to sort of adjust certain things that I do in certain situations with older people sometimes because they do think that I'm like fresh out of college or whatever when I'm not. It's funny how like a lot of people are usually intimidated by me as it is. So when I'm put in that kind of situation and then I start throwing numbers and stats and like all this knowledge at people, they don't know what to do with it because they just assume. But I've noticed that has been a huge assumption over time. That's been a problem for me and it's not just me, like my best friend deals with that too, because he also looks very young and he's actually older than I am. But it's just a constant issue. But part of it is like with those types of things, what you did where you actually went and you confront it head on seems to be the only way it ever really corrects itself. And I think sometimes in these situations, people tend to avoid conflict for the sake of avoiding conflict because they don't want to deal with the uncomfortability of it. But that usually makes things more awkward and more uncomfortable and worse in the long run, because then there's also all this resentment and these shoved down feelings. And it usually doesn't work out very well when you do that.
No, I think you're 100% right. And the only thing I would add to that is that it's great when it works out when you confront somebody. What sucks is when you go to talk to someone and what are you talking about? Of course you're good. I don't have an issue with you. And you're like, you clearly do, you douchebag. You clearly do. It's palpable. It's in the air. Even in this room, I just want to hurt you because I don't like you that much. There is something between us that's not working. And if you are in that position, you're a leader that's like, I can't show that I don't like someone. Yes, you can. And you need to deal with it because one, especially if you're in a big company, you can transfer most likely and be like, look, we're just not a good fit. And it also helps the other person to understand that, okay, what they're going through is something you're going through too. Or if it really is you, look, you're not showing up on time, you're whatever. It helps them understand what the issue is so that they can correct it. But if you're in this inertia, this weird phase where you're like, we just kind of avoid each other, we don't like it, it makes it awkward for everybody and no one can improve. You're going to be more frustrated if you're the one who's having the issue. And you're also not doing a service to the individual because even if they don't learn from their lessons, you can take action on it later. But if they're just kind of doing the same thing over and over again and it's pissing you off and you've done nothing to correct it, well, you're the problem, not them.
Well, I think that gets into the communication part. A lot of people don't know how to communicate when there's conflict or how to communicate when it's not something you want to communicate about. And that's a skill. And especially if you're a leader in a company or you're a leader at all, you really have to work on that communication part. And that has to be kind of, I would say, even one of the most important skills that you learn. Because if you don't know how to communicate things properly, even just the conflict part alone is going to make things deteriorate. But as a whole, it's going to make things deteriorate because you're not able to delegate properly. You're not able to talk to people and actually know what's going on and actually ask what's going on is the other thing. I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with over the years who have no idea what's going on in their own company. And I'm just like, how do you not know this? And how are you okay with not knowing this is a better question.
That is a full episode right there, because just briefly, the answer is a lot of the time, especially when you become the boss, people have a perception of what the boss is. And I was listening to, because I was on a road trip out to California and I heard this really interesting analogy here. And I think it's really important. And I want to express it here because I think this is also going to help with this topic here is the idea of, so the CEO doesn't need to know everything. Their job is to set the course, the framework, and everything for the company. And part of the problem with being a CEO is there's no job description for a CEO. Like no one,
good point.
I hadn't thought about this, but it's so true. Everyone's going to perceive a CEO differently of that role. However, when you go to a chief technology officer, what is that? Okay, we all understand what that is. Chief accounting officer, we all know what that is. This is what it means. The CFO, all those things. But the point I'm trying to make here is that when you are a leader of a company, though, because there's no definition of a leader in a company, especially the leader, the owner, the CEO, whatever, a lot of people assume you should know these things, when in reality, if you've built it right, they should understand the culture of their company, but they should really be looking towards the future and not managing those day-to-day activities. That's why it's almost the way, it was a Simon Sinek book called The Infinite Game. And basically his point was that you need to have basically dual leadership. So you need to have people that complement each other. So you've got to have the visionary, then you've got to have like the CFO who understands the actual business and understands what was working there. So you guys can blend things together. And I think part of these issues that we run into with when you don't like people or ageism and all those kind of things, it's that frustration level pops up that we start thinking about, oh God, I have to train this person, because most people hate training. So that starts you off on the wrong foot, because the minute you think someone's younger, you start going to that road of, oh God, like they don't know this, they don't know that, whatever. The perception of that. The other piece of it is that as you go down this road, you start developing your own opinions of things as you grow in your career, balancing that out with people that don't necessarily see eye to eye with you, but actually complement your skill sets, I think helps dilute that frustration level, which also I think helps with the fact of not liking people sometimes at work. Because I think a lot of the times the reason we don't like people is, yes, it is clearly that sometimes you walk in a room, you're like, I do not like you. Okay. There's nothing there's something innate in you. There is something that's going on. There's nothing you can do there. Like that's innate. Don't try to fight that, deal with it. But I think a lot of the time for most people, it's a frustration level. Either I'm overtaxed and now I've got to do this, or I don't know you and now I have to get to know you, because a lot of things that run into is like introvert versus extrovert people, oil and water a lot of the time. And so if you're that gregarious person, like you had talked about with the, kind of the dark rain cloud and then the leprechaun over here, like polar opposites work really well when they complement their skill set. They don't work well when they cannot be compatible. For instance, if you love to spend money and you're with someone who saves, That is not compatible. That is polar opposite. You will constantly clash on this and you will fight forever. But if you're someone who's like wants to learn, but is a spender, and you've got someone who's a saver and you can complement each other, that works. And so I think understanding those little pieces of human nature and understanding when you don't like someone, part of your job is to figure out what is it that you don't like? What is not working? And is there something that I can do about it? If there's not, keep going forward. One thing you always know about it is it's temporary. They're not going to be there forever. And two, you're not going to have that same role forever. So try to push through. If it becomes really bad, escalate the situation, try to get it solved.
Well, I will tell you, you touched on something that's really interesting that I actually didn't have on my list today, but I think is a very important aspect of it is expectation. So you were talking about how nobody knows the definition of what a CEO does. It's going to be different to everyone. But I think that's kind of in everything though, because I will tell you, sometimes even when you have complementary people and it's not so much the conflict is that you don't like each other or whatever. Sometimes it's the fact that you have a different expectation. And so like a good example of that is I went into business with a friend of mine many years ago. We worked really, really well together. We had already run a company together, and then we were venturing out on our own. But the problem is what you said, there was a different expectation of what an owner and a like executive level person does in a job versus what an employee does. And as we went along, I started realizing that they wanted to be an employee. They did not want to be on the executive level, which is a very different situation, especially when you're in a startup, as you know, because you're also a serial entrepreneur as I am. But I think that gets into something interesting though, and I do want to talk about it because it does bring up different conflict, is that yes, there are certain things that should be delegated, in my opinion, as a CEO and as somebody who is running a company or being on the executive level and being an owner of a company. However, if you don't understand the fundamental, like different in and out points of your company and the major things that are influencing it, you will fail. And that is a lack of leadership, a lack of communication, and a lack of putting the effort in to realize that, hey, you're still the main piece of this puzzle here. If you just disconnect because you feel like, oh, well, my team can just handle it, and there's no leadership, and those teams are all doing 50 billion different things that don't actually align with each other, then the company's going to fail every time. And that is, I think, something that becomes a huge problem. And it's something that I've had to sit down with a lot of my clients and be like, listen, if you don't give a flying fuck about your marketing and you're just like willy-nilly, whatever about your branding, your company will fail. You have to have your story straight. You have to know who you are, and you have to move forward in some sort of alignment, or you're just like throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks. And I think it's like that in a lot of companies. As we move forward and we grow and we do these different things, we kind of forget sometimes that it's still our responsibility. And not all CEOs are like that. I mean, obviously I've worked with companies that are great and don't have that problem, but there are also a lot of people who do, and they get on this sort of high horse where they think that, oh, well, I'm running it, I can just, everyone does the work and I just get to sit and like hope it works out. And that's not really how it works.
It does not work, and hope is not a strategy. So
No.
People think that it is definitely not. And I think that's a really important point, Blake. I love that, because people, I think we often get lost in that space of we envision. I think this is where the 80s killed everything. I really do mean this in terms of like a perception of business. The 80s taught us that greed is good, that you should, if you're in business, you're going to make millions of dollars. Don't really care about the consumer. Just spend a lot of money and kind of fleece them because they're willing to pay it. So you should charge that much and maximize your profit and be short-sighted. And it's stupid. And unfortunately, there's millions of Westerners. It's not the same in Eastern cultures, but in Western cultures that grew up that way. And so we're trying to break this paradigm now. We're trying to go back to a different way of thinking and trying to go back to, look, should we be trying to maximize profit, or should we trying to figure out what our business is doing and how it's a community and what can we do there? And that goes back to branding and image and everything else. But it also goes back to the fact that as a leader, you need to be receptive to teams that aren't working. You need to be understanding if your people are not getting along, you're going to fail. And I think probably, I don't know what it's like now because I haven't been on a production set in years, but I honestly have always thought that people should always go to a production set because if you've never seen a TV show or a movie or anything put together, it looks like chaos. There's people running around, everyone's wearing a headset, but there's probably a million, not a million, but probably like 20 different things going on at any moment in time. There's people yelling, there's someone crying, there's someone bringing food, there's someone who tripped and hurt themselves, lights aren't working. There's a million things going on. And yet when they say action, it works. And it's a really crazy thing to watch, all these pieces, and then all of a sudden it seems to work. And you're like, how the hell did that work? And you realize that over time, especially if you've been in it, it's a dance. And people understand, okay, this is my role. This is what I do. So I'm going to do this. And this is my role. This is what I do. Okay, you're an actor. You're going to do this. You're a gaffer, whatever. And I think that that's part, that to me was a huge lesson in life, to learn that it may look chaotic, but it doesn't mean it is chaotic. I think especially for people that are really rigid in terms of you do A, then you do B, then you do C. That's great in math. That's great in chemistry, because if you make a mistake, you can blow yourself up sometimes, right? I get that. A doctor, yeah, I'd like you to do A plus B plus C always on me. Okay, please do that. All right. But when it comes to business, most of the time, you can jump A to Z sometimes, because a lot of people are working on that middle piece. And so I think understanding your business to the point where you know what's going on, but you also know what's not working is part of your responsibility. And part of that is noticing where those friction points are, because those friction points can be a blessing to you, because sometimes friction creates great things. And a lot of the time it creates downfall. And so being aware of that as a leader, you need to pay attention to that, because like one of the worst advice I've ever gotten was this douchebag boss I had. There were a couple team members in the team, and I'm like, I don't know what to do here. They do not like each other. I need to get rid of one of them. And he's like, no, they'll just work it out over time. And of course they didn't work it out. They ended up fighting.
No.
You know, it was horrible. And
sorry, real quick, that face I just made was part of what I said earlier of the judgmental Capricorn eyebrow face, where I was like,
well, you nailed it, because I saw it. And it was great, because that's a look you should give during those situations. You're a horrible leader. I hope you've improved. And that was bad advice. But part of being a leader is, if you see this stuff going on, your job is to step in and stop it or try to correct it. Don't sit back and don't ever say, let them work it out. Okay. As a leader, your job is to figure out a way to solve that problem, because if they're spending time trying to figure out how to get along together, they're not being productive in what you're paying them for. Think more
excellent point.
Oh, wait, what?
I was like, I hear it. I hear it.
I was waiting for it, because we're about 40 minutes in. We needed one. Okay, good. Tag, you're it, Blake.
So I agree with everything that you said. And I was gonna bring up a point. So did you ever end up reading Homeless to Billionaire? I know I had told you about it at some point, but did you get to it yet?
Yeah. So actually, I've got it on audiobook. So I listened to it, months ago. Yes. And I loved it.
Okay. So one thing I love that he talks about is saying how when you have conflict and things like that in business, how it tends to grow and it kind of muddies your pond, so to speak.
Yes.
And I agree with that. And there's been times where, as a leader, you sometimes have to make these difficult choices. And this leads me into a story that happened on one of my production sets. I had a show that got optioned. We had already shot a proof of concept, and we were at the screening party. One of my above the line people who I had grown very close with over this period of time got so drunk that they were literally sitting on the floor hugging people's feet.
Oh.
And yeah, and I was so embarrassed because I had producers there. This was like a wrap party / viewing party / there were people there from the option, and the producers were there. Like it was like a multi-party get together thing. They got so drunk. I was like, oh my God. Somebody else who was above the line with me was like, we got to get her out of here. We ended up going and helping her off the floor. I had one of my other producers run everything while I left, and I snuck her out the back, put her in the car, took her home, and had to have somebody babysit her because I was worried that she was going to like vomit and die or something. She was that drunk. And anyway, long story short, everything was said and done. She wrote me this big, long apology, asked to have a meeting with me. We sat down. She just keeps apologizing. She's crying. I felt really, really bad. But I said to her, I said, listen, I really wish I didn't have to do this, but I have to do this because of the choice that you made. I said, I can't move forward with you anymore. I said, this was an opportunity for not only you and everybody else on this particular project, and you blew it. And I said, I can't trust you to know that you're going to be able to handle yourself from here on out, that you're going to be able to handle your relationships with these higher level people. And I said, I can't work with you anymore. I am happy to support you in any other way that I can. I will be here if you need advice for anything, but I cannot recommend you and I cannot bring you forward on this project from here on out. And to this day, I really hate that I had to do that. And I still feel kind of bad about it because she was really young. She's very talented, still very talented. I really love and appreciate her work. But if I would have brought her forward and she would have continued in that manner, it would have caused a lot of problems for not only me, but everybody else on any of those productions. And it was a safety hazard. As an executive producer on a project, if I'm bringing my crew to any kind of party and they get drunk and something happens to them, I'm responsible. So there were so many different things that went into that. And I still feel bad because it just, to me, I felt like I was dashing her hopes and dreams in some way. And I'm sure in a certain sense, she probably felt that way. And I'm sorry that I had to make her feel that way. But at the same time, she had to understand the position that she put me in with the choices that she made. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to be that bad guy and you have to be that person. And that's why I talk about how avoiding conflict doesn't do anything. If I would have just avoided that, what happened at the next get together, the next party? What if she would have gotten alcohol poisoning or whatever? I mean, there's so many different aspects of that that could become a problem. Unfortunately, I was the one who had to deal with it, but I do think it was the right choice. And from my understanding, she's been very successful and managed to continue on her way and continue on her goals and better herself, which is awesome. And I'm so happy that she's been able to do that. But it just really, it's still one of those things that I think back and I'm like, man, I wish I didn't have to do that. Like, it's just one of those sucky things, you know, how you have to be the bad guy sometimes. And oftentimes, if you're an executive producer, you're the bad guy a lot more than you want to be.
Most of the time. Absolutely. But that's your job. That's part of. So I'm sorry you had to go through that because that's never fun. I've been on the receiving end of that when I was younger, and that sucks. But I will tell you that it never feels good at the time, but it's probably you did her an actual service by doing that because at least you didn't let the behavior continue, right? So it was a good lesson learned early in life because imagine if you're in your 40s and then you finally find out about it. That's a hard transition. I mean, after 40 years, you piss all these people off. It's a hard lesson to learn, but in your 20s or even teens or whatever old she was, like it's a cool time to learn that lesson because it's hard, but you have a lot of runway to make up for it and hopefully never make that mistake again. I think is kind of my rule of thumb is alcohol and that stuff just don't make good partners. No matter how much we try, especially like going out after work and hanging out, it's just weird. I had one employee one time that, I mean, we had worked together forever, like 7 years or something. He had a massive crush on this girl that we brought on, but no one knew. He was like internally never talked about it like that. And we're in the middle of having the dinner. It was at this bar or appetizers, I guess. And he just leans in and starts trying to kiss her. And I mean, in front of everybody.
Not
and
good.
He was caught off guard. And, because he was drunk. And so my rule has ever been since then, like, look, we can go out. You get one drink. That's it. I'm not doing any more than that. I don't want this to be an awkward thing. I want it like, let's talk, let's hang out. Let's not get inebriated to the point where you have to make out with somebody. It was this thing because we're just laughing and talking. And all of a sudden you see him like lean in. I'm like, is he? Oh. And you just watched it in her face. Like it was weird. He was not a reciprocated. It was that it's even worse because it's that like lips connect, but didn't reciprocate. And so like your heart's breaking, but you're also like, what a weirdo. And like all these
so awkward.
It's totally, and there's like 10 people watching you do this and you have to work together. So it's like all of these things playing out and it did not go well. He got transferred very quickly after that. Unfortunately, he was an unbelievably solid dude. I do not follow up with him. So unlike you, I don't know if his career has skyrocketed or if he's down. I don't know where he is in this world right now, but good lesson is that, look, if you go out with your peers, you need some kind of stress relief. You got to take that pressure off, whatever. I always recommend laughter. Just laugh together, have fun. Drinking, again, I'm not against it by any stretch of the imagination, but it usually results in bad decisions. It just does. If you have to work with someone, especially the next day, and you did something, it makes it awkward for everyone. And no matter how much you try to hide it, the stories are always awesome. You'll be teased forever. Everyone knows what you did. I love people that come in and like, they have no idea. We all know if you hooked up. We all do. You always know. All right. And just there's other ways to deal with it. So my rule of thumb is, look, absolutely go out, have as much fun as you want. I'm going to be here for one drink. If you guys continue that, I personally am going to step out, because whatever you do at that point on, I don't want to be part of.
Yeah, I would say, drinking's not usually, especially if it's people who are unaware of their alcohol tolerance and those types of things. It can cause a lot of issues. Unfortunately, the place that we were doing the party, so it was an open bar type situation. Thankfully, though, other than me and the person that got her out, and then my other producer who had to cover for me, I don't think anybody actually did see her, because there were so many people there. And if they did, they turned a blind eye to it and just pretended they didn't see it. So she saved herself a lot of embarrassment in that way, because we got her, we dealt with it very fast. However, it still was the fact of it still was a decision that had been made. It still had to be resolved. Yeah, it was a whole thing. But you live and you learn, and sometimes you learn in the harder ways, but sometimes the harder ways teach you better lessons. So
absolutely. They always suck. One thing we have to keep in mind here, because they do suck. Let's just admit it. Okay. Those lessons are not fun at the time, but they do pay dividends in the long run, especially if you learn from them. And, as we start getting ready to kind of summarize everything here, I'll leave you with one more story that I think is kind of fun, is that right before the pandemic, I was doing a project with a buddy of mine. It was really weird because he had brought on a couple of his friends that wanted to work, and I didn't really know them. It was like this team we were putting together, and I didn't really know them, whatever. And one of the girls he had dated before this. So he brought her on as I felt bad for dumping you, but let's meet up on this project. And we all got in this room. We were talking, we were having fun. And all of a sudden it just was awkward, because he was trying to be super nice, but you could tell she had this weird feeling to him. And so finally, after the first meeting, I pulled him aside. I'm like, dude, what? There's more to play here. And he tells me the story. I'm like, what? This is not the time to do that. You guys solve those problems offline. And so my message to all of you is, if you were trying to be a good person and you feel guilty or whatever because you broke up with someone, don't hire them to work with you. You can refer them. That's awesome. You can support them as best you can, be a friend, whatever you want to be. Please don't bring them into projects. That's the weirdest, awkward. And again, I'm just going to tell you right now, it does not work.
Well, unless you get to a point where none of those things are even in the playing field anymore, because there are people who break up and are friends way after that. But I agree with you. If you're not completely over that and you're doing it out of guilt, probably not the best decision.
Caveat, because that's true. Yeah. You can break up and do that, but I'm talking about that fresh and you feel guilty mode, like that.
Yeah, no, don't do that. Don't do that at all. Unfortunately, especially when you're in the entertainment industry, you are often working with your friends, your boyfriends, your exes, your girlfriends, your exes, or whatever.
Again, though, the more I've done in life, the more I realize I don't think that's just entertainment, though, because
that's true, because you tend to work with people out of your network. So I guess you have a point.
Exactly. And so I just be careful there. That's all I'm going to say, because I think, especially if you left it in a weird space, but if you guys are both amicable and everything, absolutely. But if it's that weird, we've all been there. Again, we all notice when things are awkward, and people play it off like, you knew that? Yes. If you didn't, you shouldn't be a human. There's something flawed in you. There's something off. So anyways, if you notice that, it's important also, I think, to call it out, because it just creates tension with everyone else, and it creates this weird environment and judgment and everything else. Talk about these things. You mentioned earlier in terms of communication. Communication is absolutely important, but also recognizing your responsibility in these things is really important too, because if you are not acknowledging your role, what you're contributing to this, then you're not being, helpful to anyone as well.
I think that's an excellent point. And I think you just dropped another one, Justin.
What?
Another knowledge bomb.
Blake, thank you. And I will tell you right now that dose feels good. Dose. On a side note, I will tell you a funny story that I'll pass off to you so I saw my mom this last weekend, and it was so funny. We went to a Mexican restaurant and she couldn't remember the beer she wanted. So we're like, Dos Equis, we're going through all these, Modelo Negro, all these different beers. And ended up, she wanted a Corona. I was like, remember Corona? It was just the funniest thing. We're going through all these beers, and the server is super nice. She's like, okay, what else? Okay, we've got Dos Equis. And my mom's like, no, No. And like, she's like, Corona? Yeah. 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 I'm like, Mom.
That is funny. Well, I just remembered another funny story. When I was working at one of the talent agencies I was at, there was, she was some sort of like something in the modeling agency side.
Okay.
And I guess she had gone out to some event with some of the models and gotten drunk and ended up hitting on a whole bunch of them. And it came back to the owner of the agency, and that didn't go over well. But she apparently thought that I somehow told the owner, even though I wasn't there, which was the funniest thing to me. And I was like, I wasn't even there. Like, what are you talking about? And she had this whole story about, oh, I saw you. Da, 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 da. And I was like, how drunk were you? Are you sure you were only drunk? Were you on like hallucinogens too?
Okay. Alcohol and mushrooms, not a good combo. Shouldn't do it. You just shouldn't do it. There's no helping those people. I'm just going to let you know. Like, that's the worst, though. Doesn't that suck? You're guilty and you didn't even do anything.
I remember she comes in. She's like, I remember she was so pissed. She walks in and she's like, I can't believe you did that. She like goes off on me. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? And then she got more mad. And to this day, I still have no idea what the hell.
But you know that she's probably still bitter about that. That's the best part.
Oh,
like,
she is actually. Yeah, no, she is. I know that because years later, I ran into her at some sort of art gallery event and she was just like, and like walked up. Something must have happened. Like sometimes there's no fixing it. Sometimes it just let it be.
So my typical response to that, okay, especially when you're not at a work function, but you're out at like an event like that and someone does that to you and you're with people, right? And they see it and they're like, what the hell was that? I'll be like, crazy ex. They're always like, it always kills the tension because everyone's like, oh, I get that. I'm like, I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. Yes.
That's funny.
But it's always fun to do because I have a little humor to that because those moments are always awkward and you're like, it's been like 5 years. You're still that uptight up. Like, Shake, you need some therapy. Yes. Well, Blake, I think this is a really fun topic as usual. And I think it's important that, like, look, there's going to be people you don't like. There's going to be people that you are going to work with, that you're going to struggle with. Don't bottle it up is really the end message. I think what we're talking about. Laugh about it, get it out, talk to the person if you're up to it. If you are so nervous about it because they're your boss or whatever, go to HR, talk to your friends about it. Don't live with this weird feeling because it's only going to metastasize and turn into something you don't want it to.
I agree with that 100%. And I also think that sometimes you're going to run into situations where there's only so much fixing or like communication you can do until sometimes it's just out of your hands. And knowing when that expiration date is and where that line is, I think is important too.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. And I'll try to make this funny. I know some of you will suffer at this one, but I think this is hilarious. My favorite is when you meet a couple that's been together for 9 years and she's been hanging on like he's going to propose soon. I'm like, he's not. Like, that's not it. It's the same kind of analogy here. Be self-aware, pay attention. Just be aware, pay attention.
Well, Justin, as they say, all good things must come to an end.
Alas, they must. However, this isn't the end because next week, same time, same channel, we drop another episode.
So get excited because we're going to be diving deeper into all the topics of the not so subtle truth about success and
the art of sucking less in the pursuit of it. So join the conversation below and don't forget to subscribe.